Hello, it's good to see you all here. My name is Kiia Salmela. I am from Guangzhou Uprising Institute from Lund office, and I'm currently doing my internship focusing on the area of human rights in local governance and human rights cities. Today, I'm honored to moderate this online discussion, and I warmly welcome all the participants and speakers of today's session for my behalf. It was unfortunate that the last online session was cancelled, but it is so nice to see you all here today. Next, I will briefly go through the agenda of the session. We are going to have our third and final online discussion on training for local actors integrating a human rights-based approach into local SDG policies. Today's session focuses on human rights cities movements, as well as the role of the leadership. The session is divided into a panel discussion with Q&A and an open mic parts. First, we will have approximately 40 minutes of panel discussion on the human rights city movement and sustainability of integration of rights into urban planning. And there are some guiding questions for the discussions, which are: first, what is the triggering factor that inspires your city to become a human rights city? How do cities ensure that human rights are integrated and continuously applied into local policies independent of political leadership? And third, reflecting on both cities' journey to become a human rights city, what are the main action points you would like to suggest for cities aspiring to be a human rights city? We have with us today 3 excellent speakers from different human rights cities, which I would like to introduce now. Our first speaker is Wanda Tfn, who is a senior researcher in her social and political sciences at the Graz Center, and is also responsible for the public relation and marketing. Her expertise is in civil society processes, political participation, and youth engagement. I hope I said everything right. If you want to add something, please do so.
It was perfect. Thank you very much for the kind invitation, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Wanda. Our second speaker is Mr. Fahmi Hidayat, who is the coordinator of the Human Rights City Task Force of the government of Wonosobo in Central Java, Indonesia. And he is working to integrate the right-based approach perspective into local policy-making framework. Welcome, Fahmi. And if you have something what you want to add, please do so.
Yeah. Hello, Kia. Hello, Wanda. And hello, everybody. From the good to see you again. Actually, I participated in blended learning course in 2019, as far as I can remember.
Thank you, Fahmi. And our last speaker is Professor Guangzhou Xin, a director of the Guangzhou International Center, which, among other things, has organized annual World Human Rights City Forum since 2011. Guangzhou has been a senior policy advisor for human rights and international affairs for the city of Guangzhou since 2015. Welcome, Guangzhou, and if you want to add something, please do so. I think you are in mute.
It is great to meet you all here, sharing my experience as a member of the Human Rights City. In fact, I am addressed continuously as a professor because I have been a lifelong professor until I retired 9 years ago. But still, I began to get involved with Guangzhou City in diverse functions. But at the moment, I am closely collaborating with the City Hall, organizing World Human Rights Cities Forum, as well as its advisor for human rights and international collaboration. So I am very privileged, and then I am very happy to meet you with like this, sharing my experiences. and then whatever I have. And then through this engagement, I am learning as well.
Thank you, Guangzhou. We really appreciate the time and the effort of the speakers to come to speak on this event, and I want to thank you from my behalf as well. Well, moving on, after the panel discussion, we have about 25 minutes Q&A session where you have opportunity to ask questions from our participants. And finally, we will have an open mic where our training participants share their reflection on the guiding questions, which is the role of leadership in sustaining local human rights initiatives. We try to finish at 3:35 and latest 3:35, 45, I mean, and I hope this is okay for everyone. So before we get started with the panel discussion, we will be having a photo session. We are going to take a group picture. I will kindly ask you to switch on your camera, and my colleague Lina will assist with technicalities. So please put on your big smile.
Okay, everyone, give your best smile. I will count until 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's move to another screen. 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Lina, for taking the photos. Well, great, that to be done. We are going forward to the panel discussion. Each speaker has approximately 12 to 13 minutes. And as I said, we will have a Q&A question after all the 3 presentations. So if you have a question, you can post it in the chat box during the presentation, but we will discuss them after all the presentations. That to be said, I would like to ask our first speaker to take over. Wanda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Wanda Tfn. I'm speaking to you from the city of Graz in Austria, and I've been delegated here today by the mayor's office and by the office of the Human Rights Advisory Board. I work actually for a human rights NGO in the city, which is quite crucial in the whole human rights city process, but I will talk a bit more about the role of this institution later on. So I thought I'd start by congratulating you actually on the SDG handbook on the handbook on localizing SDGs, because I think it's a very, very crucial tool, especially highlighting the role of local governments. And you also mentioned human rights cities as one of the frameworks within which to advance this agenda. So Graz, where I'm from, it's the 2nd biggest city in Austria. It was actually the first city in Europe to become a human rights city. This was in 2001. So the human rights city is going on 22 years of age. And the human rights city is best conceived as a way for a city to really actively take a stance in the promotion of human rights. So it's not just about respecting, protecting, and fulfilling, but really actively promoting human rights, so going a step further. A crucial point in the whole discussion about a human rights city is that this is a self-commitment. So there is no big agency delegating a human rights city to be one, but it's a self-commitment. And this already implies one of the very important aspects. The political will and the conviction must come from within the city. And this is, I guess, one of the crucial points in respect to the guiding questions, but I will go into this. So I thought I'd start about just explaining about Graz, how this whole city process came into being, and I will end with some 5 takeaways that I hope are useful for your context, and I will later on also be sharing a link in the chat. So Europe, Austria obviously has a very dark history if we look at the Second World War, and in the period of the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of critical reflection of how to deal with these atrocities of the war. And this politically led to Graz also having a mayor who was very, very committed to social causes. And he was very committed to finding consensus amidst political parties. And in the 90s, there was the Yugoslavian war. And because of the situation of Graz, we were in the position where we received a very large number of refugees from Yugoslavia. So the question for this mayor in the 90s became how to effectively manage this very big challenge. And because of his consensus-based approach, he found actually a very nice way to manage interreligious dialogue and kind of living together in respect and peace. So there was already kind of a very fertile ground because of his political practice, and also considering this whole reflective moment after the Second World War. So it was actually this context, and I guess this is the importance of context, that laid the groundwork for how Graz could become a human rights city. So we have the mayor, we have his political style, and we also have a very strong NGO scene in Graz, very active civil society, also coming from this reflective period. And one of the key actors is actually my office. So we're a human rights research and capacity building institution, and it's a small city, 300,000 people. So we've been in very close cooperation with the city administration for 25 years, I would say. And in the year 2001, the idea emerged that because Graz was already doing all of these things, why not self-commit to becoming a human rights city? Because the mayor was already convinced about the importance of human rights. And there was an institution that had the thematic expertise that could kind of support this progress to make sure that it's not just political, but really a thematic commitment. So in the year 2001, Graz was the first city in all of Europe to become a human rights city. And it did this by passing a resolution in city council that basically commits Graz to 5 key priorities. Using international human rights norms as guidance in all activities, ongoing monitoring to identify good practices and deficits and to keep improving, mainstreaming human rights in administration, in the public sector, in the private sector, promoting human rights education and making sure the public is also in on this process, and international networking and exchange. So this is the whole package that kind of guides the city in all of its human rights related activities since 2001. And the main institution that was entrusted with coordinating this process and with devising this strategy was my office as the Human Rights Institute, as a research institute, closely cooperating with university. So I've already touched on 2 very important factors, which is the importance of human rights city movement coming from within, the mayor, and also having a kind of external guidance. And there's a lot of different ways that cities do this. Graz has my office, Guangzhou has a human rights department, other cities have action plans, but it's always important to kind of structurally embed this intention outside of the mere political process. So this is exactly what we're talking about today. So these 5 pillars, as I said, there's actually 2, I guess, main important takeaways from them. The first one is, we all know that human rights are a very abstract concept, and it's often very hard to convince people of the importance of this concept because it's very ideological almost, it's very normative. So what has worked in Graz is to really translate human rights, and by default also SDGs, into the quality of life. Because the quality of life is linked to, how do I feel in the city? Do I have access to public services? What institutions are available? Am I being treated equally? Is there discrimination, etc.? So for us, the narrative of quality of life has helped not only lobbying the political parties, but also convincing the public that human rights are something worth striving for and that they're not a political agenda, but that actually it's a city's role to ensure that every city inhabitant has a good quality of life. So this is an important aspect to make sure that the narrative is not abstract, but graspable. And the second thing is, just because Graz has this declaration from 2001, it doesn't mean that this is a finished process. A crucial point in this entire human rights city status is that it's an ongoing process. This process in Graz has been ongoing for 22 years almost. It's a constant renegotiation of rights, of the interests of different groups, of the interests of NGOs, of citizens, of political parties. It's a constant negotiation process. And this is, for me, I think, the most important part. It's a procedural priority, the human rights city process. And that's why it's important to have this support, not only from within the city, from administration, from politics, but also externally, that there is somebody lobbying really for the concept, for the topics, and not so much for the political realization, because this is the negotiation part that's ongoing. So this is the broad framework that we're operating in. And one of the key aspects is to embed this human rights idea and this quality of life and this negotiation into structural institutions, so structurally embedding the idea. And in Graz, since 2001, there's been a lot of institutions that have been developed. The most important one is the Human Rights Advisory Council. So this is a group that basically makes recommendations to the mayor's office about human rights topics. And it consists of 25 members of civil society, the judiciary, all political parties in Graz, and a bunch of other actors who really advise the political decisions the city makes. And there's a couple of others, I'll just mention them, but the most important one is the advisory board. The others are an anti-discrimination office, an advisory board for people with disabilities, a women's ombudswoman, a board for interreligious dialogue. So over these years, a lot of institutions have developed, and they're very strong and important stakeholders in ensuring that the negotiation process, that this ongoing negotiation process can work, because there is a set representation of interests that is part of the discussion. And so I mentioned the Human Rights Advisory Board as really the most important one. And it is not only because it's the direct link to the mayor and because it represents the interests of civil society and other groups, but also because it has a very important monitoring function. So one of the things I mentioned in the declaration was the importance of monitoring. And the advisory board makes a monitoring report every year of the human rights situation in Graz. And the advisory board asks about 300 organizations in the whole city, civil society, the municipal departments, everyone, every organization you can think of, the police, the Chamber of Labor, really everyone, to give an assessment of how the human rights situation looks like. And the Human Rights Advisory Board uses this information to make recommendations to the city. So this is how in Graz we ensure that there is constant development. And again, my office comes into play here because the advisory board is it's a loose network, right? So you again need one institution that is the thematic expert. And we have realized, especially during the pandemic, that the idea of resilience is so important, how to make a city resilient, how to include all of these human rights and interests into sustainable planning. And we came up with the idea of combining urban resilience with human rights. So in our latest report, which we help coordinate, the recommendations we make to the city as the council are structured along urban resilience, because this is an existing theoretical framework that ensures that all aspects of city development are catered to equally. There's 4 dimensions. If you make a change in one of the dimensions, the other dimensions are affected too. So it is our role as scientific advisors to ensure that up-to-date concepts are also introduced. And our role really is to build the bridge between theory and practice. So this is the importance of the Human Rights Advisory Board and the report. So this is ongoing, has been ongoing for over almost 20 years in this case. These institutions are internal to Graz, right? Anti-Discrimination Office, Advisory Board. And there's one more important aspect I'd like to point out that also really helps strengthen the commitment to human rights, and this is international networking. Joining forces with coalitions, joining forces with existing groups that share the same interest. In the sense of human rights, this is on the one hand, the human rights city movement. In Graz, we have also joined forces with the UNESCO city coalitions. Oh God, 1 minute, okay. The city coalition requires Graz to make a binding action plan every couple of years. And the city coalition is against racism, but because it's about racism, anti-discrimination, and inclusion, this sets a binding political framework within which to include the human rights agendas. So I will sum up with the 5 key takeaways, which is the importance of having a person from within the city to drive the process. The importance of having a kind of outside institution or mechanism to support the progress. The importance of structurally embedding this constant renegotiation through having different advisory boards and groups and action plans. The importance of breaking down the idea of human rights or the SDGs into something very, very practical. And now I forgot the last point, holding the city accountable by review and monitoring and constantly keeping it on the agenda. One last point is that there is no blueprint for this at all. And I'm happy to discuss this with you. And there's one other aspect I'd like to make in the discussion, but there is a chance for you to also discuss what works in your context by something we are organizing in Graz. So I hope this was a good overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wanda. It was an excellent overview. It was very insightful. Really learned a lot already from here. Next, I would like to ask the second panel discussions, Mr. Fahmi Hidayat to speak. Welcome, Fahmi.
Yeah, hello Kia and hello everybody. Right, okay, I do not have a very good presentation just like previous speaker, but I tried to deliver stories from what I did in 2015. Actually, Wonosobo is just another city in Central Java province in Indonesia. If there are participants from Indonesia, maybe later on can help describing Wonosobo. What kind of Wonosobo? It's just another city. We have 800,000 population, and at the time, 2 decades ago, Wonosobo, actually up until now, Wonosobo is still one of the poorest city in the regions. We had some local conflicts. I don't know what, not conflict between communities, but sometimes conflict just between the small group of youth. Yeah, in Indonesian we can call it premanisme, something like that. I don't know how to translate the term into appropriate English. Maybe later on, but Windy can help describe this term. At the time, we were one of the poorest city in Central Java. We had a very low quality in terms of education. So the average of school enrollment is below 7 years. Can you imagine? All children in Wonosobo, the average school enrollment rate below 7 years, and we have many child death rate and death rate in terms of child and maternal health quality. We were so we compared to other cities in Central Java, Wonosobo was very poor. So region at the time his name was Mr. Holik Arif. Yeah, the good thing was that she had a very a good relationship with with many NGO activists. So one day, the regent called me and asked me to collect some other colleagues from the local governments who have a good perspective on development, something like that. And then he introduced the new concept at the time from the Indonesian NGO called International NGO Forum on Indonesian Development, or INFID, and the National Commission of Human Rights. And then in 2015, we developed the Memorandum of Understanding between the local government of Guangzhou and the National Commission of Human Rights and the INFID. The MOU suggests that those two institutions will help Wonosobo in developing the concept of human rights that can be put into the planning and bureaucracy mechanism. So starting from 2016, then we had the regional law. Regional law is the highest level in terms of regulation, because it has to be approved not only by the mayor or region, but also by the local legislative end. And yeah, in this sense, I will agree with the previous speakers that we have to have a person from within. In my case, that was the previous region called Mr. Holik Arif, and it was a very controversial actually. Why? Yeah, at the time, why Wonosobo had to create an effort on regulation, regional law, because some other cities at that time, including Bandung, only had the mayor's law, not regional law. But after some succession, yeah, because in 2020 and 2020, yeah, 2000 and then we have the succession in 2016 and 2021. We I can say that if we had only mayor's regulation, then we cannot push some human rights issues to other constituencies. Yeah, although I can say that not all the member of local legislative bodies or DPRD support this idea in the same degree with others. Generally speaking, Wonosobo in the last 10 years managed by the two ruling parties called Indonesian Democratic Party, yeah, or PDIP, and PKB. These two parties represent the two biggest groups in Indonesia, preferably in Java. So by creating the regional law or peraturan daerah, it was a very big advantage from Wonosobo. And then, yeah, 2 years after we declared the regional law, in 2018, Wonosobo held the National Human Rights Festival. And at the time, we were thinking about what are other initiatives that can be taken to strengthen the previous effort. And then we had some discussion with National Commission on Human Rights, and we jumped to the idea that we need to have another regional commission. So then we reformulate another regulation on a regional commission on human rights. The idea was that Mr. Regent or Mir or Wonosobo need some expert to help him continue the policies on human rights. So in the first period of the Regional Human Rights Commission from 2018 to 2021, we have 7 commissioners, but yeah, in the first period, not all the commissioners already possess the knowledge on human rights. So this is the important thing. At the time, we forget that not all peoples here in Wonosobo already have the good literacy on human rights. So maybe it was a very different features compared to Guangzhou or many other cities in Europe. For instance, the knowledge and literacy on human rights principle, on Guangzhou principle, is what is it? I can say it's an exclusive knowledge. So we can feel that, for instance, some of the local commissioners told me, how can I perform to be a good commissioner if I do not have the proper knowledge on about human rights? So at the time, then I and other colleagues. Okay, I forgot to tell another key point that after the regional law on human rights, and then we have the special task force on human rights. So I am the government officials. I coordinate the task force, Wonosobo Human Rights Cities Task Force, and starting from 2019, not only human rights but also sustainable development goals or SDGs. Until 2021, I was assist in the regional planning board, but starting from 2021, I have moved to another unit. So today I am the head of communication and information service of Wonosobo. So I have to change my policies without losing my role in the task force. And I would like to say that today I do a lot of things in promoting the right on information. You know, one of the key performance indicator for the regional services on communication and information is how to respect and to promote on the rights on information. And the problem is that and then we had another problem. How do we how could we keep the another colleagues in the regional planning board will do the same thing? Yeah, so I will bring you this another issue that may be relevant for another discussion. In the experience of Wonosobo, having the regulation law is the key important, but we still have some problem on what is it on creating another government official to follow the idea, because after for instance, we have 10 people working on the task force. If some of the people move to another unit, then we still have problem on who will continue the idea. And yeah, but Windy and other colleagues here in this forum, yesterday we have another discussion to reformulate the system on the task force, and also we are reformulating the regulation on regional commission. So if in 2018 all the commissioners are appointed, today we will change the mechanism or procedure in choosing the commissioner, not only appointed but also limitedly public can have opinion on is suitable for the position or something like that. Yeah, I can maybe some conclusion from my short presentation is that yeah, we believe that some leaders can be a good example, but we cannot rely only on the leader, because we have a very good mayor, we have a very good region during from 2015 to 2021, but then we have a very we have a very good region from 2005 to 2015, and then we have very weak leader from 2016 to 2021, and now the good things for Wonosobo is that the person supported the idea of regulation law in 2016. Yeah, Mr. Afif Nur Hidayat. At that time, he was the head of local legislative. Today, he is becoming the new region of Wonosobo. So, although good leader, I mean, although there are some good leaders and some weak leaders, but by having a regional law on human rights, we can guarantee that all the new leader must follow the that regulation. So, and the second conclusion is that yeah, another problem in terms of how we make sure that the continuity and sustainability of person in the inside the bureaucracy. Someday I will be retired, and another person from human rights task force will be retired. So we are still struggling on how to promote the idea about human rights task force to other government officials and to other CSO and NGO. So maybe in the next years, the government of Wonosobo task force on human rights not only consists by government officials, but only some local NGO and CSO. Okay, Mbak Windy, Wanda and Kia and other participants and Professor Shin, that was my experience from Wonosobo from 2010 until today. And but we are sure that the idea of human rights cities and sustainable development goals are how to say the two becomes one. We can say the two become one's idea, and
Mr. Fahmi,
okay.
I hate to interrupt you, but we must go on an agenda.
Okay, yeah.
But
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your end notes, and thank you for your insights. It has been very pleasant to listen to you and hear your sharing your experiences. Next, I would like to ask our last discussion, Mr. Professor Guangzhou Shin, to speak. The floor is yours.
Wanda explained how Graz became the first human rights city in Europe. Graz involved in human rights violation during World War II. Guangzhou also shared very strong historical heritage, though the content of the history is quite different. We, instead of violating human rights of the people, we are violated, or rather we resisted external invasion historically, and then we also resisted military dictatorship. That's why the citizens suffered a lot. One of the most recent event was 1980 Guangzhou Uprising against military dictatorship. The Guangzhou citizens consider their history as the most important heritage for their culture in their life. Wanda also talked about 5 pillars for the city of Graz as a human rights city. I want to talk about 5 important pillars of human rights city of Guangzhou. 2 are already given by the concept note. The first one is regulations. Another one, human rights unit. So, and then I want to add 3 more. Human rights projects, human resources, and then raising the awareness of citizens on human rights. They are somewhat interconnected among themselves. So I will briefly talk about these 5 pillars. The first one, regulation. We have Human Rights Charter, Human Rights Citizens Council, Ombudsman, Human Rights Basic Plans every 5 years. We have also Human Rights Assessment device. So when we establish a new city act, it should be reviewed whether it infringes the human rights of some vulnerable groups by experts. We also have very strong human rights department. This is the biggest human rights department in Korea, even bigger than Seoul City, which is about 7 times as big of my city. Still, we have the biggest human rights department. So in addition to the 2 pillars, I will also talk about numerous human rights projects. Like one of the most important projects is World Human Rights Cities Forum, which is already known quite a lot to outside Korea and even inside Korea. It is a highly effective device for different purposes. It educates people. It expands or strengthens local network. It expands international network. As Wanda explained, international network is quite important for the city to be more human rights friendly. Also, local NGO groups continuously get involved in this forum by organizing about 10 thematic sessions. So we are learning through organizing the sessions. We are also expanding. The local NGO groups are expanding their international network as well. So the city also expand our own network with Raoul Wallenberg Institute. We are working together for this blended learning course. UCLG, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We are also working with UNESCO, as Graz is working with UNESCO as well. So under the UNESCO auspices, we are also working for Asia Pacific Coalition Against Discrimination. So Guangzhou is a leader city. And then with UNESCO, we are managing many different projects. We also mobilize human resources in government offices, universities, civil society. Without these human resources working together, I do not think we can enrich human rights city effectively. So me included, I am working for the local government, for the university, for the NGO groups. So we have to mobilize local human resources to strengthen the human rights city. We also, I also consider it quite important to educate younger generation to be more human rights friendly. We have to expose the youth to the issue of human rights and then other social issues for them to continue to support liberal political parties and then liberal political leaders. Without proper election of local government, mayors and then city councils, I do not think we can make the human rights city sustainable. In this regard, I really believe that the 5 pillars are important. Again, regulations, human rights department, numerous human rights projects, including like Human Rights Cities Forum we are managing, and then collaboration among local human resources. And then we have to enrich human resources as well. And then finally, we have to educate younger generation to be more human rights friendly and then to be exposed to social issues, to make the city more advanced in human rights. And then we have to continue to elect the human rights friendly mayors and then city council. Hope we can keep this idea better shared to strengthen human rights city movement locally and then regionally and then globally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Professor Guangzhou, for sharing all your knowledge with us. And now we have around 25 minutes Q&A session. If you have questions, please ask them. You can either write them to the chat box and we will help you read them out, or just raising your hand directly. And if there will be very many questions and we will be tight with time, I will kindly ask the panel discussions to answer directly into chat box. But we will see how it will be time-wise. So without further ado, the floor is yours, class 2022. Daya?
Thank you. I have one question to all the speakers. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your experiences about the human rights city. My question is how how your local governments are supported by central government to maintain human rights, human rights in your cities. This is common question to all the speakers. Thank you.
May I briefly talk about what the relationship between local government and then central government in Korea? That's a very proper issue to talk about. In fact, until the beginning of this year, the Korean central government was quite liberal. And then the relationship between local government and then central government was quite positive. And then human rights city movement was supported actively by central government, as well as and then it is also important to have in this regard, it is really important to have liberal government, central government, as you have in Indonesia. So Jokowi is quite supportive to the human rights movement. In addition, So in that regard, as I talked about in the final pillar, the educating the general public to choose the liberal political leaders is quite important. In addition, in Indonesia, you have a HAM already. We also have Human Rights Commission. So that kind of institution is quite important for the promotion of human rights cities locally.
Okay, I will add some information. Thank you for Mr. Daya for the question. Yeah, in one side, I think from my perspective from Wonosobo, there have been some progression in terms of relationship between the central government to local government. But there are some critical issues. For instance, in Indonesia, because we've been told that the judiciary area is one of the areas that only that belongs to the central government, yeah, and local government must work under the special regulation, the law about autonomy. In some cases, it brings some problem. For instance, the central government give the criteria. For instance, a city, if a city will be, how does it? If a city will be awarded as the human rights cities, they have to fulfill all the criteria, but not all the criteria, in my opinion, are suitable for the city, for those 500 cities, because there are differences in terms of financial resources. In Wonosobo, if we can tackle with half of the poverty problem, I think it's already been good, but not in the sense of central government. And the second issues that I've been experiencing in terms of relationship between central and local government. Okay, president and central government supports by promotion and promoting human rights, but in terms of the financial distribution between central and local government, there are many protests from the local government. Yeah, the financial distribution in terms of special allocation fund, sometimes the local government receive to only a few money. But I will also add some notion from Wonosobo. The idea of why Wonosobo promote the regional commission, regional human rights commission, is that if all the cities, yeah, if all the regency has their own commission, then we can assume not all human rights problem must be brought to Jakarta. They can be solved in their city. So I think in this sense, the central government must help all the local government in creating the regional human rights commission, although it will have different authorities compared to National Commission of Human. Thank you.
I would also like to say thank you for all the questions in the chat and for the question about the support of central government. So in Austria, the situation, I would say we have a very strong regional government, actually, which probably has more influence in its importance than the central government per se, because our regional government is very interested in or very happy about the fact that there is a human rights city that's been a human rights city for so long. And there is kind of discussion about making the region a human rights region. So there is kind of an important cooperation going on, and my organization is also very much a proponent of multi-level governance. And we try to reflect this in our work also by making sure that there is communication between the local government and the governmental actors from other levels. So one thing I have to say is that in Austria also the local authorities are quite independent, but what we have found that is very helpful to secure the support of central government is to link the importance of what we're doing to something the government is already doing. So for example, there is a lot of national action plans, for example, about how to include persons with disability or how to prevent racism or something. And as the city, it's very easy to kind of integrate what we're doing into the broader strategy. So I think an important aspect is making it known that the city is actually helping the state fulfill its mandate to realize human rights, because it's a state mandate, right? So I guess that would be the relationship. We in Graz at this moment, so haven't had, I would say, any resistance that I could think of from central government. And I think an important aspect is that the way the Human Rights City works, and because it's been working for such a long time, it gives a bit of status to the national government, because we're working with UNESCO, we have the UNESCO label, we're leveraging contact between the different levels of government. So I think the goal is to make it attractive for central government not to be an obstacle. Let me put it like this.
Thank you, Wanda, Mr. Fahmy, and Professor Shin. Since we have quite a few questions here, I think we're going to collect the questions first, and then we're going to start going through them. I think Zaman is the next one who you had raised your hand. Do you still, but now I see that you don't have hand on up anymore. Do you still have a question, or should we move forward?
Okay. Thank you. I have also some queries, and the first query is related with the human rights mechanism that has been established in the local level. All the panelists have shared us the experience that separate human rights mechanism as an accountability mechanism has been established in the respective countries, and then how does this department collaborate with the national human rights institution of the respective countries? This is my first question. As NHRIs are also established for the accountability of the human rights activities of the nation. And the next question is, could you please share us a model human rights city where all the human rights enshrined in the at least core human rights treaties are enjoyed by the people? Okay, thank you.
Was the question pointed out to some specific speaker, or just in general to everyone, all the speakers?
Yeah, I think this question goes to basically the Austrian panelist as well as the Korean panelist. Thank you.
Or can I answer another question to me? Or Wanda first?
I'm actually still taking a lot of notes because there's so many questions in the chat, so please go ahead.
I think so. Okay, yeah, maybe I can continue, or waiting
I'm
for...
just wondering, should we go on the order which are on the chat box, or maybe the first one is for Wanda, so maybe we should go, or the first ones actually are. So I think There is a question from Mura. The first questions are to Wanda, but the third question in the chat box is to Mr. Fahmy by participants. So the question is, what are the main tasks of the Human Rights Task Force? And the second part of the question is, and what is its role in development planning in local governments? Mr. Fahmy, if you would like to answer that question.
Okay, yeah, actually, Human Rights Cities and SDGs Task Force is a task force consisted at the first, it was initiated approximately 30 government officials, but then, yeah, only 20 colleagues still have the same performance. Yeah, the main task of task force is formulating the Indonesian human rights principle that is based on universal human principle into the local development, local annual development planning. So, for instance, I have to facilitate the person from the educational service in Wonosobo, and when they formulate the next year's annual budget, I have to make sure that all the person with disabilities will be included in the program or something like that. So we have approximately 20 services, including five priority issues: education, health, person with disabilities, older persons, and environment issues. So these are 5 human rights area that we will promote in Wonosobo. So the main job of task force is to make sure that the principle of human rights from the regional law to be included into the planning, into the annual budget planning. And question from Mbak Windy, yeah, what did we do at the time to local legislative to make sure that they will agree for the regional law? We invite the national NGO and person and commissioner from National Human Rights. So to make sure that the local legislature will feel safe and secure, because some of them were afraid if the regional human rights regional law initiated in the Wonosobo, that they afraid too many issues, for instance, in unemployment, education, health, that they cannot solve because of very limited financial resources. But yeah, that's the case. We make sure to the local legislative that yeah, everything is okay. We declare that we want to be a human rights cities, and we have to promote them, and not only by governmental financial resources, but also by financial resources and other resources, including the from school, from diaspora, and something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Fahmy. The next question in the chat box is from participant Veronica. The question goes like this: how about time? How long does it take for each human rights city to reach the level wherein they have become more confident about being a human rights city? So I assume this question goes to all of the speakers.
I can only share some general thoughts on this because I think it's really hard because it's a self-commitment to be a human rights city. Context just really matters. So every city that has self-committed to being a human rights city comes from an entirely different set. It has a different set of institutional situation, a different regional context, a different historical context, a different set of legal abilities to act. So I think it's very much in the self-definition, but each human rights city does have like some kind of document or some kind of founding declaration or checklist or pillars that are strategic guidelines. So I guess this is always in the matter of who you ask, how well you have adhered to the own principles you set for yourself. In a matter of time, I'm sure that there is no definite answer to this. I've also, because I've just been scrolling through the chat, I have answers to all the questions addressed to me. Should I just run through them? Okay.
Yeah, you can go do that.
Thank you for all the questions. They're really interesting, and it's been really good for me to reflect also on this. So thank you for your interest. I'm gonna start from the top. The first question was about support for NGOs and what's the link between government and civil society. So I think this comes in two levels. The first level is that the government, for example, the local government provides funding and gives a kind of space for civil society organizations to realize their own agenda. But what I think is almost more important than the financial aspect is really kind of giving them a seat at the table. So I was mentioning about all the different advisory boards that we have for human rights, for people with disabilities, for interreligious dialogue. And all of these boards include members of the important NGOs. And this is the most important thing, not just to give them money and have them do their own thing, but to really co-create the direction the city is going. And the good thing about these advisory boards is that I mean, for the city, there's no kind of requirement to follow what they advise, but it's always on the agenda. And we in Graz, with our 20 years, we can see that even among political parties who have no track record in human rights, there has been a very nuanced understanding because all of these interests and kind of bottom-up needs are represented. So I would say the key to successful partnership is a key on the table, eye-level dialogue, and the governmental support is funding and providing that. So that's the first two. Then there was a question, how can we sell human rights as not a political agenda, because it is political? Yes, everything is political. I think it's difficult to convince a lot of people that an abstract concept, like I said, is something worth their while, especially if they believe that it costs a lot of resources, and there's always this kind of taxpayer argument. In my experience, I think if it's broken down to individual well-being, every individual has an interest to have a good quality of life. And it's the role of the kind of, in our case, the supporting office to really make a link and to find a way for politicians to translate this abstract concept into something they can work with their constituency. But what works for all parties is the idea that a quality of life is something to strive towards. And that's also the job of a mayor, to ensure the quality of life. So there is a political interest in this. There's a question about how the government addresses corruption. So in our context, as I was saying before, context matters. And we're very lucky in Graz because we're in the European Union and our local governments have to fulfill the European Convention of Human Rights because it's enshrined in the convention that local governments have a certain role to fulfill. So in our kind of legal system, let's say, it works very well to have a budget at the local level that has outcome indicators that show that certain human rights standards have been fulfilled. And this is something that they are legally required to do. So it's not like the central government can come here and say, you know, I'm taking all your money. So there is actually a legal obligation for local authorities and for this multi-level governance actors to fulfill certain standards. So in this area, we're very lucky because the European Union as well is doing a lot in this area. So I'm afraid I can't really answer the corruption question. And finally, the question about how to make the argument, how to get over this argument that it's time consuming and expensive to have an advisory board and to do this whole participatory thing. So the Human Rights Advisory Board in Graz, it's entirely voluntary. So the mayor actually invites important people, or they can be nominated, but it's up to them if they want to do it. It's not a paid position. So this is really an ideal, like motivated by ideals. And these are all actors who within their own institutions have capacities to strengthen the agenda, but it's not like they're being paid by the city to be on the board. The only thing that costs money in our case is the background coordination of the board. So, and this is where my office comes in. We get a very small annual grant to do the administration. But actually it's a voluntary thing. And this again ties into the fact that quality of life and well-being is always worth money because it's the main priority of anyone living in the city. So by making that argument and making it public as well, that the advisory board doesn't cost money, it's not something that happens at the taxpayer's expense, it's helpful also among politicians. And I guess a key takeaway from that is also that making the commitment public and really being very open and transparent with the public about what is going on really is key also to harness this public support, because a human rights city is one thing, but an actual lived culture of human rights is another, and they go hand in hand. The human rights city helps the culture, but the culture must be built. And this is what Professor Shin was saying correctly. I think this education, investing in the next generation as well. So this is my take on things.
Thank you so much, Wanda, for sharing all this. The time flies, so I think we should move forward to the next question. Martin, you have raised your hands. Would you like to present your question, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I have two questions. My first question is to Professor Shin and Wanda. How did you convince and engage the local political leader to the human-based approach? And my second question is to Fahmi Hidayat. How did you cooperate or collaborate with municipality? What is your collaboration mechanism actually?
Should I start? Kia?
Yes, please.
I think it's a very good question, how we convince political leaders to be human rights friendly. In fact, politicians are keen to get the popular support in election. So when they know the local population support the agenda of human rights, they support it. Otherwise, they do not pay attention to human rights. So in that regard, the popular support on human rights is important. Otherwise, they don't bother supporting human rights. So in that regard, I really believe that political education of younger generation is crucial for the future of human rights citizen movement, as well as the climate change or whatever issues we face. Without enlightened public, we have no future. I want to add one more about government and NGO collaboration. In that regard, I agree with Wanda. In Guangzhou City, we have like more than 100 committees. The committee comprises local government officials, and NGO groups or expert groups or academics. So in that committee, we promote more human contact. So through the committee, the people are exposed to the government, and then government officials are exposed to civil society or academics or people. Without organizations, we don't get in touch with each other. So in that regard, we have many NGO groups in the city. We have many government committees. So organizational approach seems to be crucial. Thank you for the good question.
Thank you.
The question was also addressed to me, I believe, how to convince political leaders. So in our situation, it was actually a bit different, as I was saying at the beginning of the speech, because our mayor was already at this point in time doing so many activities that actually the human rights label was just a kind of nice to have add-on. So he was already very engaged, building consensus. He was dealing with the refugees coming from the Yugoslavian wars. And he already had kind of installed a culture of human rights awareness, you could say, because the city had to deal with this sudden melting pot and like different religions suddenly all being together in this tiny place where 300,000 people. So this is by Austrian standards, a big city, and by all other standards, a tiny town. And the thing is, after we have self-declared to be a human rights city, a few years later, he was voted out of office. But by that time, the mayor who was in office afterwards, he was from the opposing political party. He was from the Conservatives. And he still, for the last 20 years, has been, until he was voted out of office last year, he was one of the biggest supporters of the human rights city because he understood the value that it brought. And so I think when it comes to political leaders and convincing them, it's about convincing them that it has value for them and their agenda, regardless of what ideological conviction they have. So that would be my response to that.
Thank you so much, Wanda. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I think we must move forward to the open mic session. But I will ask kindly all the speakers if you have something to add on to the questions which we have on the chat box to answer directly to the chat, please. So please go through the chat box questions once again. So, and I would like to really like to thank you. I'm sorry, for all your excellent questions. They have been very insightful. As I mentioned earlier, now the participants will share on their reflections on the guiding questions, the role of leadership in sustaining local human rights initiatives. I will kindly ask you to share your reflection on the role of local leadership in sustaining local human rights initiatives in their cities, and whether you think your mayors, local politicians could have played a role in this context. And I will share this to the chat box, to the questions. But now I would like to give you approximately 10 minutes to reflect and prepare your thoughts. And then we'll have approximately 10 minutes more to share your reflections. And while you start speaking, after 10 minutes of reflection, I will kindly ask you to mention your name and from which city you are representing. So the time is now 3:18, so that we will meet back here 3:38 in 10 minutes, and then share our reflections. So thank you and see you in 10 minutes. Leopoldo, you have your
Oh, yes. Yes, Ma'am Kia. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to share my thoughts on the role of leadership in sustaining local human rights initiative. Yes, our local leaders would actually set the face of human rights based approach in all the processes that will be undertaken in the organization. Either it is within the organization, just like what our one of our speakers told us a while ago, and even the top management, our elected officials. Another thing is leadership would set the example as if they would be walking their talk with the proper knowledge and understanding and application of what human rights is all about. They will actually help pursue the legitimate interests and goals of the local government unit. And another thing that I learned this afternoon is human rights is almost always equated as one political agenda, but our leaders can disabuse this position, this state of mind, by explaining that it is not. It is they themselves who could actually help all the stakeholders to consider human rights as an idea that is not only limited to political agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Leopoldo. And I forgot to say, but if you already have answered your reflections, you are very welcome to share them already now. Or if you would like to post them to the chat box, that goes as well. Arlene, I see that you are raising your hand, please.
Yes, hello. I just would like to share my thoughts on our experiences with the role of leadership in sustaining local human rights initiatives. Just like what I have heard from the speakers, it's very important, it's very crucial for human rights initiatives to take off, to be successful, if it is very well supported by, especially by local government units. But it is sad to say that there are times that, although we would like to say that there should be no political agenda in pushing human rights initiatives, but I think it should be the CHR like us should also be on the lookout whether our initiatives should be used for political agenda or not. But I do believe that with a strong support coming from the local government units, from the local politicians, it is very important on how far and how fast would your political, with your human rights initiatives go through. How far would it reach people? Because the support coming from the local politicians and from the local government units will definitely spell a difference on the length of time that a human rights institution like us could go, the length of time that we would be able to see the end of our hard work, the fruit of our labor in pushing for human rights initiatives. So therefore, even if it's very difficult that at times, for example, human rights institutions like us does not have the support of local government officials, but I think it's also always important for us to keep on pushing. So keep on pushing and never falter, because in so doing, I think that we will be able to reach out to people, and with the help of the people also, they will also reach out to our local politicians in order to adopt our human rights initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene, for sharing this reflection with us. I can see that there is a reflection in the chat box from Leopoldo Oviedo to Leopoldo Oviedo from Fahmi Hidayat. We collaborate with local NGOs, CSOs, as well other communities groups. Sometimes we give task force member a stage for them. We hold a human rights festival in 2016, 2017, and 2018. We amplify all human rights ideas in every formal and informal programs. For instance, recently, when we had a sustainable watershed campaign, we put it as a campaign for human rights in environments. When we celebrate this Disabled Day, we call it campaign for Wonosobo Disabled Friendly Program, etc. Thank you for sharing these reflections. Just check if there are any hands. No. Then we can go to the, if there is the next one. Were there some hands? Oh. No. There is a next, or Daya. You had raised your hand earlier. Would you like to speak up?
Just I want to share that, definitely the supports of local leaders is very important to institutionalize or mainstream human rights at local level. But sometimes we experience that even the local leaders, they say that human rights is not our agenda. It is the Western agenda, somehow it is Western agenda imposed by Western countries, some local political leaders, they have that kind of concept, perception. So when we are working at the local level, we face that kind of, problems. And it is very difficult to change the mindset of political leaders at the local level, because within the political parties, they don't talk about the human rights. There is no discussion about the human rights. So they don't have much idea and much, information about the human rights. So at local level, so definitely, the leadership and their idea and realization of the human rights is very important to implement the human rights at the local level. This is just our experience.
Thank you so much, Daya, for sharing the experience. I see that Fahmi had shared a reflection, additional relevant information from Wonosobo to the chats. I will read it out loud. Sometimes when task force and region have a debate with local legislators, the financial resources distribution issue also come up. Some good legislative member agree if the limited resources will be distributed to all, but some bad member insist that it will be only distributed to their constituents. Thank you for sharing additional information, Fahmi. Then there are two more reflection on the chat box, and after that, I'm afraid that due to the time we must close the open mic session. But I will read from the Stephanie Tan. She has been written like this: I am glad to hear from all the speakers. So many takeaways, really great input for all of us cities who also envision our cities to be human rights city. Much as we would like to be successful in this endeavor, leadership or leaders from local governments plays a very important role. They need to embrace it. They need to acknowledge its significance, because even if it's other sectors like NGOs, CSOs, and national governments are actually playing its role, if it's the leaders from local government units is missing piece, then it will be very hard for us to attain human rights city. Thank you for sharing this comment with us, Stephanie. And then, oh, I'm sorry. There is a missing part. The comment is going on. I'm sorry, Stephanie. I will read it until the end. As the local government official, activities like this are very commendable, because we were able to realign our thoughts and our plans and programs toward a more meaningful approach to human rights. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing this with us. And then there will be one more reflection from Havana, prioritizing local agendas, addressing issue of equality, social inclusion, respecting diversity, creating feedback mechanism, common forum to share and learn, as well as empowering second generation could be the starting points, and practicing VLRR process on SDGs, making a local human rights plan. I see that Wendy have got some questions to share from the participants. So Wendy, please go ahead.
Hi, so thanks everyone. Thanks Gia for moderating, and it was very insightful and very interesting discussion. I am very happy that we have a lot of questions. No, I think it's not a question, it's more about just concluding the open mic session, and then we can give a round of applause, virtual applause to everyone. I would like to give, on behalf of Kia, I would like to give the floor to Wanda and to Professor Shin and to Pak Fahmi. Each of you will have 5 minutes to have a concluding remarks, etc. And yeah, and then we're gonna close the open mic, and then I'll give you all the training participants a little bit of information about what's next. Thank you. First. So, Professor Shin, if you want to start.
In fact, I want to talk about one more, emphasize one more, which is as an individual, we are quite reluctant to participate. So if we are invited through the organization we belong to, then we can easily be mobilized. So when I have an issue or complaint to the city hall, for example, I don't say anything. But if I can do it through the organization I belong to, then I can do it. So in that regard, the civil society organizations are really important. So if we have many small or big or medium-sized organizations in my city, then the city is becoming more human rights friendly, more participatory democracy we can have. So I really want to advise all government officials to participate in the local civil society organizations. In that organization, you meet people, and then you also give contribution to that organizations. Then civil society would become better activated, better funded. That's how I want to emphasize.
So next, Wanda.
Sure, thank you. Yes, Professor Shin, I agree with everything you said. I think I was going to talk about the importance of networking, because it's in human rights very often the case that there's a lot of people trying to work towards the same cause, but working independently from each other. And it's no different in the human rights city initiatives. Sometimes local governments already have a lot of initiatives, but take a different name and don't talk about human rights, but about the SDGs or about inclusion or something. So it's very important to really be on the lookout and to make use of the internet, honestly, because everything is there. And I think instead of, you know, kind of lobbying in your own isolated bubble, to really reach out to existing cities and to attend forums and to attend trainings like this as well, to just see what there is, because there is really a lot. And I'd like to take this opportunity to actually tell you about one event that we're hosting in Graz. It's called Human Rights Go Local, What Works? And what we do is we basically discuss with a range of practitioners from local governments, but also from civil society and all kind of actors that are involved in human rights at the local level. We get them together for a week online, and we discuss what's it like in your context? What works for you? What doesn't work? Is it transferable? What do we wish for? So this is really our attempt in Graz as an international hub to do exactly this, to leverage this massive experience and expertise that exists. Because also listening to all these reflections, every one of you is an expert in your respective field, and there's so much to learn. So I would like to invite you to the coming event. It's in February next year. The website just went online and I will post it in the chat. It's about methods of management and governance that help anchor human rights in local government. So this is human rights budgeting, this is impact assessment, this is management by objectives, but really management tools that can help a city achieve human rights goals. And what's crucial before I click send on the chat is that there is a second link. Each academy, we create a document that contains recommendations for local governments. So basically, if you take all of these documents from the previous academies, it culminates into a bit of a guideline, if you want, and just insights into what is possible and how a local government can achieve this commitment to human rights. And this document contains some encouragements, and it also contains all of the examples that were shared during the event. So the last event was about moving from intentions to commitments. So literally exactly what we're talking about. And I will share the link, and I'm also adding my email address, because in the sense of reaching out, please do get in touch. And it would be really great to see you at the Academy. And I think with all of the reflections you've shared, this is such an optimistic and good environment. And I think it's really important to keep this optimistic sense alive, because often when confronted with politics, it's very easy to lose optimism. So thanks very much for having me.
It's okay. It's my turn. Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants of the program, and yeah, I respect very much Professor Shin, Wanda, because I learned from the GRAS Human Rights Advisory Board. Probably this is the ideal shape of the local regional human rights commission. So I find the new insights from Wanda, yeah, and yeah, Professor Shin, I admire the achievement by Guangzhou. Yeah, I attended the World Human Rights Cities Forum twice. Yeah, and then it's like I have energy from all the participants, because I reading the chat box. Yeah. There are so many new insights, yeah, and Wonosobo keep struggling with the new and with the most effective way. Yeah, for instance, in the past, yeah, we wanted a specific or exclusive human rights complaint handling tool, but we found that it was too difficult. Yeah, yeah, and then we include this feature into the available complaint handling tool, and yeah, I think it's effective. And yeah, what can I say? I I can say that, yeah, Wonosobo, it's great experience to meet with many people, because I can say that Wonosobo is monitored by so many people in the world. Yeah. And lastly, I will say that human rights is not about financial resources. It's about commitment. So if we have a strong commitment, I think there are we will find another way. For instance, recently I helped the fundraise from Wonosobo diaspora person from Wonosobo that today live in another country, and yeah, we gained relatively much money to fund our program related with human rights. So I feel so optimistic on human rights cities. Thank you.
You can speak. Yes, so thank you everyone, and I think Kia wants to say something.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Wendy, thank Lena, all the speakers. It has been a very, very insightful and teachable experience for me too. Thank you for being able to moderate this session. I will take a lot of knowledge to home today from here. Thank you. And now I will share the word back to Wendy, who will give you some practical information.
Thanks, Kia. And I think, so round of applause to Kia, our intern, as he's done a very terrific job this afternoon. And I see Stephanie raised your hand. And Stephanie, I think you're on mute.
Just a little bit of sharing after listening to our very inspiring speakers. I just realized that unconsciously, I think one of the programs of the city government since 2004, when we changed the name of the city mayor's office to the office of the people, is one of, I think, very, very much of, I think, very related to what we are driving at in this endeavor. Until now, we are when I was the mayor in 2013 until 2016. I'm still using the same name for our office because we believe that there is an equal opportunity for everyone to really talk to the mayor. So we don't have the the bureaucracy of going through a lot of offices before speaking to the mayor. So in our case in Catbalogan, until now, it is still applied that the city mayor's office is actually the office of the mayor, so, office of the people. So I think it can be adopted by all the mayors. It depends on the leaders. Again, as what I've mentioned by a lot of speakers a while ago, that it is a commitment. It should be the commitment of the local leaders or the officials. We are elected by the people, and I think the people deserve a lot from their mayors and their leaders. Thank you.
Yes, that is a very excellent last point, actually, Stephanie, and I fully agree with that. And I do believe that human rights at every level, it's not a cost, it's an investment, it's a commitment that not just the local governments, not just the mayors, not just councillors, but all of us needs to be involved and contributing actively throughout the process. And I think we touched upon a lot of different components earlier during the discussion, from the budgeting to how the legislative can play a much bigger role. But there's also a need for an awareness raising and knowledge sharing, not just to the people, but also the legislative, the executive, the NGOs, and all of us then can work in an informed environment where everyone knows what their rights are, what their role would be. And I think this has been a very interesting discussion. We had a very interesting discussion since the very first one. And if you want to watch the first discussion, it's available on our YouTube channel. And this one also will also be available in the YouTube channel. So please feel free to share the discussion to your colleagues who want to know more about this topic. And this is actually the last of our discussion series. And after this, you will have to go back to the online modules, and then please do complete them all, including the quizzes and then the sharing, because I've monitored it every morning. And I'm very happy to see how you guys all progressing, and it's very encouraging to see your sharing in the discussion board as well. I learned a lot personally, and I hope you will continue working on your modules and then develop your course project very soon, actually. And you are now embarking to the practical modules, which I hope you will find a lot of points to learn, because the practical modules are indeed developed to support you to develop the course project. So let's think and reflect a little bit more during the practical modules. And if you have any questions about the practical modules, please reach out to your advisors, and please reach out to me. If there is a need for a discussion specifically on the practical modules, please let me know. I can arrange something quick and maybe have an hour or so discussion with all of you about the practical modules. But until then, please complete your work, and let me know if you have if you need any support. And we're gonna start preparing for our trip to Guangzhou, so that's exciting. We're gonna eventually meet Professor Shin in October, hopefully. So please, Lina will be in touch with you around this month or next to prepare our trip to Korea. Stay healthy until then, everyone. And thank you again to all of you. And thank you, Wanda. Thank you, Professor Shin. Thank you, Pak Fahmi. Thank you, Kia, for supporting. Thank you so much to Lina Rahmawati for helping me throughout this program. And to all the advisors that are here, you are extremely supportive of this program, and I cannot thank you enough. Bye, everyone. Until then, bye.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Wendy and
Thank you,
Kia.
Kia.
Bye, all.
Thank you,
Bye.
Wanda.
See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.